Today our group will present about the housing policy and governance. Housing is a very important topic because it affects our daily life. Where we live can affect our safety, healthy job opportunities, and quality of life. In many countries, including Malaysia, housing problems such as high price and limited affordable housing are becoming more serious. So in the presentation, we will explain what housing policy is and what government means, and how the housing policies can manage in Malaysia. For today's presentation, we will cover 6 main parts. First, let us understand the meaning of housing policy. Housing policy refers to the laws, plans, and programs created by government to guide how housing is provided, regulated, and financed. The main arm of housing policy is to make sure that all the cities can access affordable, adequate, and quality housing. Housing policy also helps control housing price and reduce inequality between different income groups. Now let us talk about the governance. Governance refers to the process of decision making and management. It ensures that housing province and probably plan implemented and morality. This slide helps us understand housing policy more clearly. Housing policy focuses on 3 main areas: affordability, accessibility, and quality of housing. This government uses housing policy to support housing supply and manage land using properly. Housing policy also aims to solve problems such as housing shortage, rising housing price, and inequality in urban areas. For example, the government may provide housing subsidies to low-income families or introduce rent control laws to protect tenants. Other common action is building low-cost housing projects for people who cannot afford housing in the private market. Governance in housing is about how housing policies are covered out in real life. It focuses on transparent accountabilities and public participation. Good governance ensures that housing policies are not only written on paper but are also effectively implemented. For example, when the government launches housing projects, good governance means funds are using properly, housing are disturbed fairly, cities are allowed to give feedbacks. This helps increase public trust in housing programs. This slide explains the relationship between policy and governance. Policy is the plan, while governance in the actions. Housing policy provides the goals and the framework, and the governance ensure that these goals are achieved fairly and efficiently. For example, if the policy says build affordable house, governance makes sure the house are actually built. The quality is accept and the house go to people who really need them. So housing policy and governance must work together to improve the housing system.
The issues that surround housing policy and the governance. Housing policy aims to provide safe and affordable home for everyone. However, many countries are still facing serious housing problems today. Several key issues continue to affect housing policy and governance. One major issue is housing affordability. In many countries, house prices are rising much faster than people's income. As a result, many middle and low-income families cannot afford to buy a home. Even rent a home has become very expensive in some cities. One reason for the problem is the high cost of land and constructions, especially in urban areas. Developers need to cover this high cost so housing prices increase. In Malaysia and Singapore, the problem is very clear. Many young people find it difficult to afford their first home. Some have to continue live with their parents. Others take on long-term housing loans, which create a financial pressure. Because of these reasons, housing affordability remains a serious challenge in many countries. Another important issue is inequality and access to housing. In many societies, wealthy individuals can own multiple properties, often for investment. At the same time, low-income families struggle to rent one suitable home. There is also a large gap between urban and rural housing conditions. Urban areas usually have better housing quality, facilities, and infrastructure. In contrast, housing in rural areas may be older and less well maintained. In addition, marginalized groups often face more difficulties in the housing market. Groups such as the elderly, migrants, and low-income workers may experience housing discrimination. Some landlords may refuse to rent homes to them. This unequal access to housing makes it difficult to achieve fair and inclusive housing systems. The third issue is weak governance and poor implementation. In some countries, housing policies exist, but they are not well managed or properly monitored. As a result, housing programs do not always reach the people who need them most. Corruption and lack of transparency are also serious problems. In some cases, housing allocation is unfair, and the resources are not distributed equally. Another issue is the housing policies change frequently while new governments take office. This created instability and affects long-term housing projects. Furthermore, poor coordination between government agencies can slow down housing development. When agencies do not work together effectively, projects facing delay and higher costs. All these factors reduce the effectiveness of housing policy. In summary, housing policy and governance face several major challenges. Housing affordability, inequality, and weak implementation remain key issues. To improve housing systems, strong governance, transparency, and long-term planning are necessary. Only then can housing policies better serve the needs of society.
Hi everyone, the next part is the relevant case examples. In this section, I will present the relevant case examples related to housing policy and governance. Different countries adopt different housing governance models, and these approaches often reflect their economic structures and political systems. By looking at specific national cases, we can better understand how governments balance affordability, equity, and efficiency in housing provision. In this part, I will focus on three key examples: Singapore, the United Kingdom, and Japan, which represent three distinct governance approaches. Together, these cases show how governance plays a crucial role in shaping housing outcomes worldwide. The first case is Singapore, which is often seen as a model of strong-state governance in housing. Since 1916, public housing in Singapore has been managed by the Housing and Development Board, also known as the HDB. In this system, the government plays a central role as it builds, sells, and manages public housing directly. As a result, more than 60% of Singapore's citizens live in HDB flats, making public housing the dominant form of housing provision in the country. Housing in Singapore is also closely connected to the financial system. The Central Provident Fund, or CPF, allows citizens to use their savings to finance home ownership, which makes housing more affordable for a large part of the population. In addition to affordability, Singapore's housing governance also focuses on social integration. Policies such as ethnic integration quotas are designed to promote racial harmony within public housing estates. Overall, Singapore's case demonstrates how strong state interventions and centralized governance can achieve high levels of home ownership, social stability, and efficient housing delivery. The second example is the United Kingdom, which represents a more market-driven housing approach. In contrast to Singapore, the UK housing market is largely led by private developers, with a more limited role for direct government provision. One of the most significant housing policies in the UK was the right to buy policy introduced in the 1980s, which allowed tenants to purchase public housing at discounted prices. While this policy increased home ownership for some groups, it also led to a long-term reduction in social housing stock. To support low-income renters, the UK government provides housing benefits, which helps householders cover rental costs in the private market. However, this approach does not directly increase the supply of affordable housing. As a result, the UK faces major challenges today, including an affordability crisis and the loss of social housing. In response, the government has introduced initiatives such as the Affordable Home Program, which aims to restore balance by increasing affordable housing supply. This case highlights the strengths and limitations of market-led governance, especially when state intervention is relatively weak. The third example is Japan, which adopts a planning-oriented governance approach, particularly in response to demographic change. Japan has introduced the Compact City strategy, which aims to promote more efficient and sustainable urban living. Housing policy in Japan places a strong emphasis on elderly housing and urban renewal, reflecting the country's rapidly aging population. Rather than focusing only on ownership or affordability, governments in Japan prioritize long-term spatial planning. Housing and urban development are mainly managed by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, or MLIT, in cooperation with local governments. This multi-level governance structure allows policies to be adapted to local conditions. However, Japan also faces significant challenges, such as vacant homes and population decline, especially in rural and suburban areas. Japan's case shows how housing governance can be used as a tool to address demographic and spatial challenges rather than purely economic ones. And in short, all these examples help us better understand the role of governance in housing system across different national contexts. And that's all of this part.
Good morning, everyone. Today, my presentation focuses on the international perspectives of housing policy and governance. Housing is not only basic human need, but also a key part of social stability and economical development. different countries adopted different housing policies based on their economical conditions, political systems, and social needs. In this presentation, I will explore global strategies for affordable and sustainable housing, and explain how governments around the world try to balance affordability, sustainability, and social equality. First, let me examine what housing policy means. Housing policy refers to government actions to make sure people can have safe, affordable, and sustainable homes. However, many countries faced common problems. One major problem is rapid urbanization. More people move to cities, so the demand for housing increases. Another problem is the high cost of housing, which many people can't afford. In addition, homelessness and informal housing are also serious problems. Because of these problems, governments have several goals. They want to increase affordable housing, support sustainable urban development, and encourage cooperation between the government and private companies. Next, I will briefly introduce three international examples. The first example is Singapore, which is well known for its public housing success. About 8% of Singapore citizens live in HDB flats. This is achieved through strong government planning and affordable home ownership policies. The second example is Germany, which focuses on rent control and social housing. The government emphasizes tenant protection and rent regulation, while also cooperating will provide developers to increase house support. The third example is United States, which follows a more market-regenerated housing system. The government provides housing subsidies and vouchers such as Section 8 to support low-income households. However, this system also faces challenges, including inequality, housing structures, and urban segregation. From these examples, we can learn several key points. First, no housing policy works for every country. Each country needs its own solution. Second, a good housing system needs a balance between market efficiency and social fairness. Third, long-term planning and clear policies are very important. In the future, housing policies should support environmental protection and sustainable development goals. Countries should also work together to solve global housing problems.
Hello, my name is Elis binti Ismadi and my matrix number is A213049. For my part, I will discuss the Malaysian housing policy and governance framework, focusing on its historical development, key national policies, as well as current issues and recent reforms. Malaysia's housing policy has evolved over several decades, reflecting changes in economic development, urbanization, and social needs. The overall objective throughout these periods has remained consistent to ensure a home for every Malaysian family. Firstly, let us take a look at the historical development of housing policy in Malaysia. During the 1960s to 1980s, the government focused mainly on basic housing provision and squatter eradication. Programs such as the Rumah Murah RMM initiative were introduced to address poor living conditions, especially in urban areas. Moving into the 1990s and early 2000s, there was a clear shift towards home ownership. The private sector began to play a larger role, with the government acting more as a regulator and facilitator rather than the sole provider of housing. In the 2010s to 2020s, housing policy placed greater emphasis on affordability, inclusivity, and sustainability. This period recognized that housing is not just about ownership, but also about quality of life, accessibility, and long-term environmental impact. Next, I will highlight the key national housing policies and programs currently guiding housing development in Malaysia. The National Housing Policy, DPN 2018 to 2025, outlines 5 main thrusts, which are adequacy, quality, governance, partnerships, and accessibility. This policy aims to ensure that housing supply matches the needs of different income groups. In addition, the National Affordable Housing Framework, also known as DRMM, defines affordable housing as homes priced below RM 300,000, providing a standard benchmark for policy implementation. Several major housing programs support this framework, including PRIMA, which targets affordable housing for the M40 income group, PPAIM or Residency Wilayah, which focuses on housing for civil servants, My Home, which provides incentives for private developers to build affordable units, Rumah Selangorku, a state-level initiative tailored to local needs. Despite these policies, Malaysia continues to face several governance challenges in the housing sector. One major issue is overlapping jurisdictions between federal and state governments, which can slow down policy execution and project approvals. Another challenge is high land ownership costs, especially in urban areas, which significantly limit the supply of affordable housing. There are also policy implementation gaps, such as delays, weak monitoring systems, and non-compliance with affordable housing quotas. Additionally, urban-rural disparities remain evident, with housing developments heavily concentrated in cities, leading to unequal access in rural areas. Lastly, before 2018, there was serious transparency and data issues, as Malaysia lacked an integrated national housing database, making planning and targeting less effective. To address these challenges, several recent reforms and improvements have been introduced. The establishment of the National Affordable Housing Council (NAHC) provides a central platform chaired by the Prime Minister to improve coordination between agencies. Data integration initiatives such as eKasih and the National Housing Data Bank (NHDB) now help ensure that housing assistance reaches eligible beneficiaries. The government has also introduced digital transformation, allowing online applications for programs such as PRIMA and Residency Wilayah, improving efficiency and transparency. Furthermore, public-private partnerships (PPP) have been strengthened by offering incentives to developers to participate in affordable housing projects. Finally, sustainability has become a key focus with the adoption of Green Building Index (GBI) and Low Carbon Cities Framework (LCCF) to promote environmentally responsible housing development.
In Malaysia, housing governance involves cooperation at many levels. These include the level federal government, state governments, financial institutions, and international organizations. Those organizations work together to design housing policies, provide funding, manage land allocation, and deliver housing programs. Their common goal is to achieve affordable, quality, and sustainable housing for all Malaysians. KPKT stands for the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. It is a central body responsible for national housing policy formulation, regulation of housing developers. KPKT also oversees the implementation of the National Housing Policy 2018 to 2025. Some public housing projects under KPKT include PPR, People's Housing Project, PR1MA, and also the Roman Mosla Ruakayat. KPKT also promote data-driven planning and supporting sustainable urban housing developments. This slide introduces two important implementing agencies. First is PR1MA Malaysia. PR1MA focuses on providing a valuable house for middle income group M40 and also supports rent-to-own schemes, balance city environment. Second is SPNB, focused on low-income group B40. It runs programs such as Roman Masla Ruakatyat, government subsidized housing. Also support housing development in rural and semi-urban areas. This agency plays a very important role in helping Malaysians access affordable housing. This slide talks about financial and state support institutions. Those institutions support housing through finance and local management. For example, Bank Negara, Malaysia, controls housing loans and supports first-time buyers through My First House scheme. Kakmas Berhir helps keep the housing loans market stable. At the state level, housing boards and local authorities manage land, affordable housing projects, and make sure policy work locally. These slides focus on research and international partners. They support housing policy by providing research and data. UN Habitat promotes sustainable and inclusive housing under SDG 11. The World Bank, KRI, and Think City study housing affordability and help improve policy quality and governance. In conclusion, housing policy needs a strong cooperation. Financial institutions, state authorities, and research partners all play important roles. Together, they support affordable and sustainable housing in Malaysia. That's all. Thank you for watching.